ago, I walked into Zara with absolutely no intention of buying anything. And by no intention, I mean I had just given my parents a very confident, a very mature speech on how I was just going to look. And I'm definitely not going to be spending any money today. And 30 minutes later, I walk out of that store carrying a massive bag full of clothes. Apparently, my self control had decided to stay inside the store that day, probably trying on a jacket that I couldn't afford. As a 16-year-old, I like to think I'm pretty great at making decisions. After all, I manage my schoolwork, navigate through the complex world of social media all single handedly. But fast fashion stores have have a highly engineered way of making you feel like buying a basic green shirt is a life changing opportunity. The bright lights, the upbeat music is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Everything feels like it's just about to disappear forever. And the next minute, you're standing in front of the mirror and thinking, well, do I even need this? I don't. What if I need it later? Which for some reason feels like it's an excellent logic to anything in the heat of the moment. When I walked outside the store, my friend saw me carrying a huge bag full of Zara clothes. And honestly, she giggled a bit and looked at my guilty face and said, it's okay, it was all on sale anyways. When you're young and it's on sale, sometimes sounds less like an explanation and more like a legally valid reason in an airtight defense in a court of law. At the time, I agreed with her completely. It felt totally normal. It felt what everyone does. But later that day, I was squeezing my clothes into the closet, which was halfway packed full, and I proposed a question to me inside my head. When did cheap become more important than needed? I looked at my wardrobe and realized something honestly. My habits match a massive global trend. Today we buy more clothes than our parents did. Our closets are bursting, but we keep our clothes half the time. I realized I had worn a huge number of clothes already. To me, it just seemed like a good deal that day. It was just fashion. But the truth is, this isn't just my story, it's our story. Almost all of us have done this once or twice. We scroll through shopping just to look. We tell ourselves we won't be buying anything today. Not because we won't be buying anything today. And somehow we're still standing on our doorstep waiting for our order to come. Not because we actually need those clothes, but because marketing convinces us that we have to stay relevant. Today, fashion is just about micro trends, trends that change before we even speak or even have the time to wash clothes we just bought. What felt exciting last month already feels outdated today. We stop wearing things that we used to love, not because they've worn out, but because something never even replaced them. This shift now feels natural to us because behind every new arrival is a global system that is designed to make a shop even faster. For brands, fast buying means fast growth, and for them to grow, we constantly need to keep purchasing clothes. We are pushed to believe that buying more means moving forward, but trying to keep up with these trends make us lose awareness. My perspective didn't change from a textbook or a documentary. It changed because of a real life human moment. During a research project, I visited a local clothing factory. I expected something to be clean, modern, like the stores that we shop in. But what I saw was far more than raw. There was no bright light, no polished displays. It was just rows and rows of people sitting together, and and there was silence. The only sound that was loud was the humming of the dozens of sewing machines in the middle of that room. I noticed her, a girl named Sushmita. She looked very young, close to my age. She completely focused on stitching bright, trendy fabric with a mechanical speed. She didn't even look up once, not even once. Something about her made me pause. When she finally stopped to rest, I asked her a question. I asked, do you ever think about the people who wear these clothes that you make, she just casually replied, दीदी हम लोग तो ये कपड़े बस बनाते हैं पर पहनने का तो टाइम ही नहीं होता. Then she looked down and added, आप लोग एक बार कपड़े पहन के तो साइड कर देते हो, हम पूरा दिन वही बनाते रहते हैं. And there was absolutely no anger in her voice when she said that. There was no accusation, no bitterness, or no hatred at all. Just a quiet matter of fact of truth. And somehow that complete lack of malice made it even more devastatingly powerful. Because in that exact very moment, the distance between our lives had felt very real. For something that I picked on a casual Saturday afternoon just because it was on sale, for her had meant the exact same garment had represented hours and hours of exhausting work. When I saw as a temporary disposable trend, she experienced that as a daily yielding constant. There I stood, and I genuinely didn't know how to respond. There wasn't anything to argue. I had lived my whole life with the narrative of retail therapy and comfort narrative that I had lived in my entire life. Completely had just stopped making sense now. The very good idea of a good deal felt entirely fake and incomplete. Ignoring the painful story that was written inside that book, and when I thought back to that Zara bag, completely sitting inside my room, it suddenly didn't feel light as it once had. But the cost of our hidden choices doesn't stop with the human impact. There is another massive perspective that we rarely even consider. One that does not have a voice to speak up, but still bears the brutal consequences of our shopping. Our Mother Earth. We hear the fashion industry damages the environment, but the real scope of staggering but the real scope of staggering is the bears the brutal consequences of our shopping. Every single year, the world creates mountains and mountains of clothing waste. To simply put it, is an equivalent to the garbage truck full of clothes being dumped into a landfill every single second as we speak. We like to comfort ourselves with the idea of recycling, but mostly this is just an illusion. Only a tiny fraction of clothing is actually turned into new clothing. The vast majority is buried, burned, or turned into rags, and the burden of the planet's resources get only worse. Just to make one single cotton t-shirt, it takes up thousands and thousands and liters of fresh water, textile dyeing, causing massive water pollution, leaving rivers near factories turning into toxic shades of blue, red, and purple. Our synthetic clothes shed plastic particles into the water every time we wash them. The fashion industry is is the fashion industry is responsible for a massive share in the global carbon emission. Every single time we buy an item, because it is cheap, fast, or trending, we are choosing to ignore the reality. The environment is paying the remaining balance on our discounts. Now, my understanding of this entire complex web had deepened when I began my research framework with productivity. There I was pushed to explore how consumer behavior is not just an isolated personal choice, but it is a primary driving force behind the massive environmental social systems. I began to realize how tiny details and tiny individual actions, when multiplied by millions of people across the globe, directly shape massive industries, influence corporate policies, and impact the fragile ecosystems that we have been ignoring. Later, while I was conducting research alongside a policy professor at Singapore Management University, I was introduced to ESG frameworks, which stands for Environmental, Social, Governance, Responsibility. Corporations use these metrics to, evaluate sustainability. But what stood out to me even more was the profound realization sustainability cannot be limited to just companies or governments. It is shared. It belongs to all of us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just looking at a rack of clothes. I was looking at a chain of people that were interconnected, processes, environments, and corporate systems. And all were linked together. I began to understand what seems like a small, harmless retail decision is a vote for how we want the world to operate. It is a link, it is a chain, and every single link matters. But what I tell you very clearly isn't just about guilt. Guilt doesn't create a long term impact. It makes us uncomfortable for just a minute, I suppose, but rarely changes our habits. This is not about a speech or never shopping again. It is not about boycotting brands or rejecting the joy of fashion. Fashion is a beautiful form of human expression, but the goal is not to eliminate fashion, but to respect it. What it is much simpler. The power of pause. We have normalized not knowing where our things even come from. The system needs us to stay blind to work. What happens if we interrupt that habit? What happens if we swipe cards? What happens if we just think before swiping cards or ordering your clothes or just pressing buy now? We simply pause and ask a quiet few questions. Do I really need this, or is it just a clever ad convincing me? Who even made this item, and what did it truly even cost them? Am I choosing quality over quantity, or investing things that are meant to stay years, that last years instead of weeks? Those questions don't require you to be a perfect environmental expert. They just require your honest attention. The representation of our world would look like, with just a few smarter or conscious and more intentional choices, is a world where we value quality over quantity and people over profit. So the next time you walk into that store, whether it's Zara, H&M, Uniqlo, or anywhere else, I don't want you to feel a wave of overwhelming guilt. I just simply want you to take a breath and just a simple pause, even if it's for a fleeting moment, because in that very brief pause, the room is made for awareness. And in awareness lies the seeds of potential for change and lasting change that is real. And maybe, just maybe, that tiny quiet shift in our collective perspective is exactly where something bigger begins. Thank you.